In a cramped dorm room at the University of Texas, two roommates were running the exact same secret operation, and neither one knew the other was doing it. Every mug of warm milk, every accidental hand on a bare stomach, every jealous glare across a crowded party was a quiet move in a plan neither man would admit out loud. The only person who never noticed was the one they were both chasing, his own oblivious roommate, too busy convinced he was watching two enemies fall for each other to realize he was the one everyone was falling for. He shipped the wrong story for an entire semester. So how long can two grown men run a silent campaign for one heart before the truth finally catches up? Stick around, because this is exactly how the wrong ship found its right harbor. My name is Milo Parker. I am 20 years old, and I have exactly one talent in this world. I can smell a slow-burn romance from 400 yards away. I don't mean that as a brag. I mean it as a diagnosis. Somewhere around sophomore year of high school, I read one webcomic about two rival hockey players who hated each other so much they started making out in the equipment closet, and something in my brain rewired itself permanently. Now I am 20, a sophomore art history major at the University of Texas at Austin, and I have a note on my phone titled, "Ships That Will Destroy Me," with 41 entries. None of that, I want to be extremely clear, prepared me for what happened in room 412 of Jester Center. It's move-in day. My mother is somewhere behind me arguing with an elevator about weight limits, and I'm standing in the doorway of my new triple dorm room holding a box labeled Fragile. It is not fragile, it is my Funko Pop collection, but you have to lie to movers when I see him for the first time. Dominic Carter, 21, junior, forward on the UT Club basketball team, 6'3" of pure golden retriever energy poured into a human body. He's got a duffel bag over one shoulder and a box of protein powder under the other arm, and he is grinning at me like we've already been best friends for a decade. "Yo," he says, sticking out a hand that could palm my whole face. "You're the third roommate? Dominic. Dom's fine. Also every kind of fine, honestly." I shake his hand. It is enormous and warm and slightly damp with Texas in August sweat, and I already know, with the bone-deep certainty of a man who has read 400 fictional love stories, that I am looking at a male lead. Then the window unit kicks on, blasting cold air across the room, and a second voice says, without looking up from the book he's reading on the bottom bunk, "You're blocking the door." Sebastian Hayes, 21, junior, computer science major, the kind of quiet that feels less like shyness and more like a loaded silence. He has dark hair that falls just slightly into his eyes, forearms dusted with what I will later learn is permanent marker from whiteboard debugging sessions, and an expression that suggests he has already found something wrong with everyone he's ever met. Dominic doesn't move an inch. "Say please." "Move," Sebastian says, "or I will file a formal roommate complaint before you've even unpacked." "You wouldn't." "Try me." And then, this is the part that ruins my entire semester before it's even started. Sebastian looks up, meets Dominic's eyes, and the two of them hold this glare for a solid 3 seconds that has absolutely nothing to do with a doorway, and everything to do with something ancient and electric crackling between them, before Dominic finally laughs and steps aside. I stand there with my Funko Pops, and somewhere deep in my chest a ship sets sail. By week 2, I have collected the following data points, all carefully logged in my Notes app under a new folder called Carter X Hayes, Evidence Log. They fight constantly, about the thermostat, about whose turn it is to take out the trash, about whether the Spurs or the Mavericks are the better team, a fight so vicious I had to leave the room. And yet, and this is the part that matters, they cannot seem to exist more than 10 feet apart. Dominic waits for Sebastian outside his 8 a.m. discrete math lecture, even though it's a 15-minute walk out of his way. Sebastian, who apparently despises basketball, has started showing up to Dominic's intramural games and standing at the fence with his arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, except he's there, every single time. At night, our room is a triple bunk situation. Dominic on top, Sebastian on the bottom, me on the pull-out trundle wedged between them like a human speed bump. Some nights I wake up to hear them arguing in furious whispers about absolutely nothing, and other nights I wake up to dead silence, which is somehow worse, because it means one of them fell asleep first and the other one is just lying there, listening, watching. I tell my sister everything, obviously. Chloe is 17, a senior in high school back in Columbus, and she has been my partner in shipping crime since she introduced me to my very first BL manoir in 8th grade. Chloe, okay wait, catch me up. Dog boy and cat boy still fighting? Me worse, they fight like they're getting paid for it. Chloe, enemies to lovers. Me Chloe, I live in the source material. Chloe, I'm booking a flight to Austin. I need to witness this. I laugh and put my phone down, blissfully unaware that I am not, in fact, watching a slow-burn romance unfold in front of me. I am standing directly in the blast radius of one. The first big wave of papers and quizzes hits in the 3rd week of September, and our room transforms overnight into a war zone of highlighters and energy drink cans. I have an art history paper due on Caravaggio that I have not started. Sebastian has a data structures exam that he refuses to stop muttering about under his breath, and Dominic has decided, apparently, that the correct response to academic stress is to become extremely, aggressively affectionate with everyone in a 10-foot radius. You've been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes, he informs me, draping himself over the back of my desk chair like a very large, very warm blanket. His chin lands on top of my head. Want help? You're a kinesiology major. You do not know anything about chiaroscuro. I know that word now. I learned it from your notes. See? Helpful. Behind us, Sebastian doesn't look up from his laptop, but his voice cuts through anyway, flat and precise. Carter, if you distract him into failing that paper, I will make sure your fantasy football league finds out you've been losing to a bot account. Dominic goes rigid. You wouldn't. I would enjoy it. That's okay, that's low, even for you. While they descend into their usual bickering, I feel something warm settle low in my stomach that I don't examine too closely, because Dominic's chin is still resting on my head, and he smells like laundry detergent and the inside of a gym bag in a way that should not, logically, be a pleasant combination, and yet. An hour later, the 3 of us have migrated onto the floor between the bunks, papers spread everywhere, and at some point, I genuinely could not tell you when, Sebastian has ended up sitting with his back against my bunk, one knee drawn up, red pen moving through my rough draft with the ruthless efficiency of a man performing surgery. This sentence doesn't mean anything, he says, tapping the page. It sounds smart, though. Sounding smart and being smart are different skills. You have one of them. Wow, thank you so much. I said one, he says, and there, right there, at the very corner of his mouth, is the smallest, most fleeting almost smile I have seen on his face since move-in day. It's gone before I can even fully register it, but it leaves an after-image, the way staring at a light does. Dominic, sprawled on his stomach, with his textbook open to a page he has clearly not read in 15 minutes, watches this exchange with an expression I can't quite place, something between annoyance and longing, gone before I can look at it directly. You never look at my essays like that, he mutters. You've never shown me an essay, Sebastian says, without looking up. That's because you'd be mean about it. I'm mean about everything, ask him, a nod toward me not unkind. I laugh, and something shifts in the room. A small, warm current I don't have the vocabulary for yet, not in September, not with 3 months of oblivious shipping still ahead of me. I go back to my paragraph. Sebastian goes back to his red pen. Dominic goes back to pretending to study while actually just watching the 2 of us, chin propped on his folded arms, an expression on his face soft enough that if I'd looked up at the wrong moment, I might have understood everything 3 months sooner. I don't look up. The moment passes. The semester, unbothered, keeps moving. 3 weeks into the semester, our floor mate Vincent Morgan, a junior communications major with main character energy and a house off Riverside that his parents definitely don't know gets used for parties, throws what he calls a welcome back bash, which is really just 40 college students crammed into a 2-bedroom rental playing increasingly unhinged party games. I did not want to come. Sebastian did not want to come. Dominic wanted to come enough for all 3 of us, and somehow that's how democracy works in our room, so here we are, sitting cross-legged on Vincent's living room floor for a game of truth or dare that has already claimed 2 people's dignity and 1 lava lamp. Your turn, Hayes, says Noah Bennett, a friend of Dominic's from the team, built like a linebacker with the chaotic energy of a man who has never once thought before speaking, spinning the bottle with theatrical menace. It lands on Sebastian. Sebastian, predictably, chooses dare because truth requires emotional vulnerability, and Sebastian would rather eat the bottle. Noah grins like Christmas came early. Kiss a guy in the room. 1 minute. Your pick. The room erupts. I choke on my lemonade. I don't drink. I ship. There's a difference, and my whole body goes electric with the kind of anticipation I usually only feel during a season finale. This is it. This is the moment. Sebastian is going to march across this circle and kiss Dominic Carter in front of God and Vincent Morgan's IKEA shelving, and I am going to witness it happen in real time, and I will never financially recover from how happy this makes me. Sebastian stands, my heart stands with him. He walks, not toward Dominic, who has gone very still and very red, but toward me. Wait, I say, with the eloquence of a man whose entire worldview is collapsing in real time. Wait, hold on. He doesn't wait. He crouches down, hooks 2 fingers under my chin, tilts my face up with a gentleness that does not match anything I have previously observed about Sebastian Hayes, and kisses me. It is not a peck. It is not a joke. For 1 full, humiliating, gorgeous minute, Sebastian Hayes kisses me like it's a decision he's already made, and I'm the last one finding out about it, while the entire room screams so loud I can feel it in my molars. When he finally pulls back, my brain has fully evacuated the building. Across the circle, Dominic's jaw is doing something violent and complicated, and his hands are curled into fists on his knees, and it is, I will realize much later, the exact expression of a man watching something he wants get taken by someone else. But in the moment, all I can think is, he panicked. He couldn't kiss Dominic in front of everyone, so he grabbed the safest, most neutral person in the room, me, the wingman, the narrator, the guy who doesn't count. I laugh it off, my ears burning, and tell myself the ship is still very much afloat. I am, it turns out, an unreliable narrator of my own life. The thing about being wrong is that you rarely notice while you're doing it. That night, walking back to Jester Center, Dominic doesn't say a single word the entire way, which for Dominic is basically a 4-alarm fire. Sebastian walks on my other side, hands in his pockets, unreadable as ever, except that twice, I catch him glancing over at me instead of at the road. I chalk it up to nothing. I chalk up a lot of things to nothing that semester. Like the mosquito bites. They start showing up in October, small reddish marks along my collarbone and the side of my neck, and I complain about them at breakfast because Austin mosquitoes are apparently sentient and vindictive. Weird, Dominic says, not looking up from his cereal. Didn't get bit at all. Me neither, says Sebastian with the same suspicious flatness. Must just taste good, I say, and go back to my eggs, blissfully failing to notice that both of them have gone very quiet and very interested in their food. There's also the nightly ritual. Whoever's on duty, apparently by some rotation I'm not privy to, brings me a mug of warm milk before bed, insisting it'll help me grow taller, since I'm the shortest of the 3 of us by a solid 5 inches. I drink it every night and sleep like the dead. Deep, dreamless, gone to the world sleep, the kind where I wake up disoriented and slightly sore in places I can't explain. I mentioned this once to Chloe, phrasing it as evidence for my case file. Me, they take turn bringing me milk. Chloe, it's very domestic, very couple-coded of them to co-parent me like this. Chloe, Milo. Me what? Chloe, nothing. Keep collecting data, I'm building a theory. I don't ask what theory. I am too busy being delighted that my sister is finally as invested in this ship as I am. The first Longhorns home game of the season falls on a blistering Saturday in late September, and Dominic treats it with the reverence most people reserve for religious holidays. He wakes us both up at 7 a.m., wearing a burnt orange jersey, 2 sizes too tight, already vibrating with the kind of energy usually associated with golden retrievers who've heard the word walk. Tailgate starts at 9, he announces, throwing a shirt at my head. Wear this, non-negotiable. It's 95 degrees outside. It's Texas. It's always 95 degrees. Wear the shirt. The tailgate lot outside Darrell K. Royal Stadium is a sea of burnt orange and white, grills smoking, someone's playlist blasting The Eyes of Texas for the 4th time in 20 minutes, and Dominic's teammate Alexander Reed, 22, center on the club basketball team, 6'6", with the booming laugh of a man who has never once been quiet in his life, greets us by hoisting Dominic clean off the ground in a hug that nearly takes out a folding table. This your little art history guy? Alexander asks, sizing me up over Dominic's shoulder. Carter won't shut up about you. Milo, right? I glance at Dominic, whose ears have gone the same shade as his jersey. He talks about me? Constantly. It's honestly a little concerning. It is not, Dominic says, too fast, shoving a plate of brisket into my hands like that will end the conversation. Eat, hydrate, we have a game to watch. Sebastian, who has made his opinion of college football tailgates known roughly 6 times already this morning, trails behind us in a plain white shirt, sunglasses on, looking like a man being marched to his own execution. He does not own burnt orange. He has made this very clear. You could have worn the jersey, Dominic says, elbowing him. I could have stayed in bed. You love this, secretly. I tolerate this, publicly. For him. A nod at me, brief and unbothered, like it's the most obvious fact in the world, and my stomach does something complicated that I once again, professionally, fail to interrogate. Inside the stadium, we end up wedged into a single row with barely enough legroom for 3 grown men, and by the second quarter I've been passed a foam finger, a churro, and somehow the entire contents of Dominic's pockets to hold just for a second, which turns into the whole game. Every time the Longhorns score, Dominic hauls me up out of my seat and into a hug that lifts my feet clean off the concrete, hollering loud enough that Alexander, 3 rows down, turns around just to laugh at him. Sebastian doesn't hug. Sebastian, I notice somewhere around the 3rd quarter, has developed the very specific habit of resting his hand flat against the small of my back every time the crowd surges to its feet, steady and grounding, like he's less interested in the game and more interested in making sure I don't get swept downstream by 80,000 overexcited strangers. You don't even like football, I say, when I finally notice. No, he agrees, eyes on the field, hand not moving. Then why? You almost fell into the aisle in the 2nd quarter, a pause, twice. I did not, in fact, almost fall. I have no explanation for why his hand stays there for the rest of the game anyway, warm through the thin cotton of my shirt, and I spend the 4th quarter far less focused on the scoreboard than I probably should be. Texas wins by 3 touchdowns. Dominic cries, actually cries, tears streaming shamelessly down his face as he screams the fight song with 80,000 strangers, and Sebastian watches him with an expression so fond it looks almost like pain, and I stand between them in the roaring stadium noise thinking, not for the last time that semester, God, I really hope these two figure their feelings out soon, utterly failing to notice that the feelings in question have, this entire time, been aimed squarely at me. Kirby Lane Cafe at 11 at night is a UT Austin institution, and by mid-October the 3 of us have a standing Thursday tradition, queso, pancakes regardless of the hour, and theoretically, peace. We arrive late, and the only open seating is a single booth built for 2 on one side and 1 on the other. I do the math immediately, shove Dominic and Sebastian onto the same bench, force 45 minutes of forced proximity, watch the slow burn ignite over a plate of migas, foolproof. I am halfway out of my seat to relocate when Dominic's hand closes around my wrist and pulls me down directly beside him. I look up in a panic. Sebastian is already sliding into the opposite bench, alone, jaw tight, eyes doing a very good impression of a man calculating a murder. Oh no, I think. He's jealous. Look at him, positively simmering. This is going great, actually. This is exactly the tension I need. Sebastian orders his food in a clipped, controlled voice and does not look at either of us for the rest of the meal, while Dominic, oblivious, infuriating, wonderful Dominic, cheerfully pours syrup on my pancakes without asking and steals bites off my plate like this is the most normal thing in the world. I spend the entire meal composing texts to Chloe about the palpable romantic tension radiating off of Sebastian Hayes from across a diner table, entirely failing to register that the tension is radiating directly at me. If you want to understand college masculinity in its purest, most chaotic form, you go to Gregory Gym on a Tuesday afternoon and watch 2 21-year-olds have a shirtless argument about their own abs. I'm there because Dominic dragged me along for moral support, which really means so someone will agree that I have more definition than Sebastian, and within 4 minutes of entering the locker room, that is exactly what's happening. Dominic flexes. Sebastian, toweling off his hair with the emotional range of a man discussing quarterly taxes, glances over and says, "That's cute," in the exact tone you'd use for a golden retriever doing a trick. Cute? Dominic rounds on him, genuinely offended down to his soul. Come here, feel this. This is not cute, this is... Before I understand what's happening, Dominic has crossed the room, wrapped an arm around my shoulders from behind, and is physically dragging my hand onto his stomach. "Tell him," he says. "Tell him this is not cute." His skin is warm and slightly damp and unfairly, cartoonishly defined, and I make a noise that is not a word and yank my hand back so fast I nearly dislocate something. "Don't, he'll kill me if I touch you," I blurt out, eyes darting to Sebastian, who has, predictably, gone dark around the eyes in a way that makes the hair on my arms stand up. Sure enough, I've barely finished the sentence before Sebastian crosses the room in 3 strides, knocks Dominic's arm off me with a controlled, almost surgical shove, and says, "Lo, do you have any shame left, Carter?" "Do you?" Dominic snaps back, and then, this is the part my brain cannot process in real time. Sebastian reaches over, takes my hand himself, and presses it flat against his own stomach. "Feel free to compare," he says to me, voice perfectly even, eyes locked on Dominic like he's just won a war. My face goes nuclear. Dominic looks like he's about to combust, and I am standing between 2 extremely attractive, extremely shirtless men who are apparently having an entire relationship argument using my hands as props, and all I can think, God help me, is, he touched me to make Dominic jealous. Genius, absolute 4D chess. I love this ship so much I could cry. They erupt into another shoving match immediately after, and I retreat to a bench to text Chloe with trembling hands, entirely certain that I have just witnessed a pivotal moment in an epic romance. I have, in fact, just been groped by both of my roommates, who are both extremely into me, and I have somehow filed the entire experience under supporting evidence for a ship that isn't real. I told you, unreliable narrator. Midterms leave me hollowed out, and by the last week of October, I've caught the kind of cold that turns your whole skull into a water balloon. I wake up on a Thursday with a fever, a raw throat, and the distinct sensation that my brain has been swapped out for wet cotton, and I am fully prepared to suffer through it alone in the noble tradition of every broke college student before me. Dominic and Sebastian have other plans. I surface from a nap sometime in the early afternoon to find my desk has been colonized. There's a mug of tea steaming on my nightstand, a box of tissues positioned within arm's reach, and my extra blanket, the one I never use because it lives folded on the top shelf of the closet, draped over me, tucked in at the sides with a precision that could only belong to one person in this room. "You're supposed to be in class," I rasp, throat like sandpaper. "Skipped it," Dominic says, not looking remotely guilty, parked cross-legged on the floor beside my bunk, with his laptop open to something that is very obviously not coursework. "Sebastian's got you covered on notes for both of us anyway." "I do not," Sebastian says from his desk. "Have you covered? I have myself covered. You're on your own." "You always say that, and then you always give me the notes." "Because the alternative is watching you fail a class and complain about it for a month, which is worse for my mental health than sharing notes." I laugh, which turns immediately into a coughing fit that has both of them across the room in about half a second. Dominic pressing the back of his hand to my forehead with an expression of real concern that doesn't match his usual easy grin. Sebastian already reaching for the thermometer he apparently bought at some point without either of us noticing. 101.2, he reports, reading it off with the clinical detachment of a man narrating a lab result, though his jaw is tight in a way that undercuts the calm voice. "You should have said something this morning instead of dragging yourself to your 9 a.m. I had a quiz." "You have a body," he says, "which takes priority over a quiz, and if you disagree with that, I will personally walk you to the health center myself." He will, Dominic confirms. He carried me there sophomore year when I sprained my ankle at practice, didn't even ask, just picked me up. "You were being dramatic about a sprain." "I was in pain, Sebastian." I watch them bicker over my sickbed with the specific warm exhaustion of someone being cared for by 2 people who are pretending the caring is incidental, and something in my chest aches in a way that has nothing to do with the cold. Dominic ends up parked on the floor beside my bunk for the rest of the afternoon, one hand resting loosely over mine on top of the blanket, thumb tracing slow absent circles against my knuckles, while he watches something on his laptop with the volume down low so it won't hurt my head. Sebastian brings soup from the dining hall, not the good kind, the sad cafeteria chicken noodle kind, but he's clearly gone out of his way for it, cutting through the cold wind to get it here before it went lukewarm, and sits on the edge of my bunk to make sure I actually eat it, instead of just stirring it around like I usually would. "You don't have to do all this," I mumble, halfway through the bowl, voice thick with congestion, and something else I can't quite name. "We know," Sebastian says. "We want to," Dominic adds, at the exact same moment, and then the two of them look at each other over my sickbed with an expression that, in hindsight, was about as subtle as a marching band, and at the time registered in my feverish brain only as further, delightful evidence for a ship that did not, as it turned out, exist. I fall asleep that night with Dominic's hand still loosely wrapped around mine, and Sebastian's spare hoodie draped over my shoulders because I complained of being cold once, hours earlier, and apparently neither of them forgot. It is, without question, the sickest and happiest I have ever been at the same time, and I don't understand why until months later, when I finally understand everything else too. Halloween in Austin means one thing, the 13th floor haunted house on Interstate 35, and Dominic, who is, despite his size, allegedly terrified of anything involving fog machines, insists we all go together for team bonding, a phrase he uses roughly the way other people use "trust me." Inside, the dark is total, and the actors are relentless, and within 30 seconds, Dominic's hand has found my waist and locked on like a seatbelt. "This is not me being scared," he announces to no one. "This is me protecting you." "Sure," I say, voice unsteady, because his hand is warm and solid, and his thumb keeps tracing small, absent circles against my hip that feel significantly less protective and significantly more like something else entirely. On my other side, Sebastian's fingers close gently over my eyes from behind. "You won't be scared if you can't see it," he murmurs, close enough that his breath stirs my hair, and I am abruptly, catastrophically aware of how solid his chest is against my back. We move like that through 3 separate rooms, sandwiched, guided, touched, and somewhere in the strobing dark, a hand that is decidedly not attached to any costumed actor slides briefly along my ribs before vanishing. I yelp. Neither of them claims responsibility. Both of them look extremely pleased with themselves. By the time we stumble out into the parking lot, adrenaline drunk and laughing, I've decided, again, wrongly, magnificently, that the haunted house was simply an excellent excuse for two people already dating to be affectionate with each other in a socially acceptable, we were scared kind of way. I don't clock, not once, that every single touch that night landed on me. The overheard conversation happens on a Sunday in early November, and it very nearly cracks my whole theory open, except that I am, apparently, constitutionally incapable of drawing the obvious conclusion. I come back from the library to find Dominic pinning Sebastian against our door with one forearm, both of them mid-argument. "We said Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays are mine," Dominic is hissing. "Tuesdays, Thursdays are yours. Sunday's a coin flip. You don't get to just—" "I never agreed to that ratio," Sebastian says, unmoved. "Best of 5 right now." I flatten myself against the hallway wall, heart pounding with journalistic fervor. A schedule. They have a schedule. For what? Quality time? Date nights? Oh my God, are they splitting custody of their own relationship like a divorced couple who still love each other? They play rock, paper, scissors, best of 5, with the grim intensity of a Supreme Court case. Sebastian wins 3 rounds to 2. Dominic calls him a cheater in 4 different creative ways. Sebastian, walking away, says something too quiet for me to catch, and Dominic goes bright red and doesn't say anything back at all, which, for Dominic, might as well be a white flag. They're negotiating turns, I text Chloe later, breathless. For something. I don't know what yet, but it's so them, possessive and petty and stupidly in love. Chloe Milo, what are the turns for, though? Specifically, spell it out for me. Me, does it matter? The point is the tension. Chloe, it kind of matters, actually. I did not listen to my sister. This will become a recurring theme. The day everything nearly falls apart is, fittingly, a Tuesday, a Sebastian day, though I don't know that yet. I'm mid-shower when my phone starts buzzing against the bathroom counter, and I remember, with sudden panic, that I've got a package coming and forgot to leave the door unlocked for the delivery guy. "Sebastian," I yell through the door, "my phone's ringing. Can you grab it? It might be the delivery guy. Tell him the code's 4471. There's a pause, then his voice, closer than I expect. "Your passcode is your phone passcode?" "It's fine, just answer it." I finish showering in blissful ignorance. It isn't until I'm toweling off that my stomach drops through the floor. My last conversation with Chloe is still open on that screen. A conversation that includes the sentence, "Okay, but if they're not a couple, then why does he bring you milk every night, Milo?" Think about it, sent an hour ago, still unread and glowing on my lock screen notification banner, right there for anyone holding my phone to see. I stand frozen in a towel for what might be several geological eras. When I finally creep out, Sebastian is sitting exactly where I left him, my phone face down on the desk, expression composed into its usual unreadable calm. "Package guy needed a signature," he says. "I signed for you." "Cool, cool, cool, cool," I say, in the voice of a man who has never once said the word cool naturally in his life. "You didn't, see anything else on there?" Something flickers behind his eyes, there and gone so fast I nearly miss it, before he says perfectly flat, "No." I believe him completely, because I am an idiot, and go about my evening none the wiser that Sebastian Hayes has just read an entire text thread analyzing his feelings for me and decided, apparently, to let me keep living in blissful denial a little longer. 2 weeks later, Sebastian wins another impossibly tense round of rock, paper, scissors, and the prize turns out to be a night at Pinball's Arcade off Breaker Lane, VR headsets and all. There's exactly one gaming chair in our reserved booth. I try to hover by the wall, magnanimously offering to just watch, when Dominic yanks me down onto his lap like it's the most natural seating arrangement in the world. "Only got one chair," he says, already looping an arm around my waist to keep me steady. "This works." I sit rigid as a plank for approximately 4 minutes before I forget to be self-conscious, because Dominic is loud and terrible at racing games and narrates his own gameplay like a sports commentator having a breakdown, and it's genuinely, deeply funny, and somewhere in there, I relax back against his chest without thinking about it. Halfway through the second race, Sebastian stands, crosses the booth, and simply lifts me off Dominic's lap and onto his own instead. "Your leg was going numb," he informs Dominic, with the smug precision of a man who has just executed a flawless tactical maneuver. "I'm helping." "I didn't say anything about my leg," Dominic says, betrayed. "You were about to." I sit very still on Sebastian's lap, acutely aware of every point of contact, while he plays with one arm loosely around me and the other hand on the controller, utterly composed, like this is nothing, like my heart isn't doing something violent and complicated in my chest. They're so considerate of each other, I think, watching them bicker over whose turn it is to hold me next like I'm a group chat responsibility, instead of a person. Truly, the most romantic thing I've ever witnessed. I would like the record to show that at no point during this entire evening did the phrase, "maybe they both like me," cross my mind, even in passing. My sister's warnings echo somewhere far away, muffled by 4 years of dedicated shipping instinct actively working against my own self-interest. Our RA, Jamie Collins, 23, a graduate student who has clearly seen too much in 2 years of managing a freshman-heavy dorm floor and has the weary patience of a kindergarten teacher during a fire drill, organizes a Friendsgiving potluck in the common lounge the week before Thanksgiving break, mostly, I suspect, to make sure nobody sets off the fire alarm attempting to deep fry anything in their room again. Dominic brings a store-bought pie and takes full credit for it. Sebastian somehow actually bakes something, a pecan tart that is inexplicably infuriatingly good, and refuses to explain when or how he learned to do this, only that some of us have hobbies beyond yelling at referees on television. I do not yell at referees. "You broke a remote control during the Longhorn Sooners game." That remote had it coming. The lounge fills up with the entire floor, paper plates balanced on knees, someone's aunt's playlist of holiday music playing too loud through a Bluetooth speaker, and I find myself wedged onto a 2-person love seat that was absolutely not built for 3. Dominic's arm slung along the back of it behind my shoulders, Sebastian's knee pressed against mine in the cramped space, neither of them making any visible effort to create more room. "Go around the circle," Jamie announces, clapping for attention. "One thing you're grateful for this semester. Keep it under 30 seconds. I have heard enough about people's situationships to last a lifetime." The circle moves. Someone says their roommate, someone says free laundry. When it lands on Dominic, he doesn't hesitate. "This idiot," he says, jerking a thumb at me, grinning, "made this whole semester less terrible. Don't let it go to your head." I flush all the way to my ears. Beside me, Sebastian, when his turn comes, says nothing quite so direct, just glances sideways at me for a beat too long before saying flatly, same, which gets a laugh from the room and a confused look from Jamie, who clearly assumed he meant Dominic and has no idea how wrong that assumption is. Later, once the lounge empties out and it's just the three of us picking at leftover pie, Dominic stretches out across the love seat with his head landing, without asking, directly in my lap. Comfortable, I ask, not moving him. Extremely. He looks up at me, upside down, grinning in that easy sunlit way he has. You're grateful for us too, right? You didn't get a turn. Obviously, I say, and mean it more than I understand yet, and reach down without thinking to push his hair back off his forehead, and he goes still and quiet under my hand, the closest either of them comes to an outright confession that entire semester. So Sebastian watches this happen from the armchair across from us, pecan tart forgotten, an expression on his face I still can't fully name even now. Something caught between fondness and longing, patient in a way that costs him something. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. I just feel distinctly the warmth of being looked at like that, and file it away, uselessly, as more evidence for the wrong story. It's late November, and I'm curled up in my bunk texting Chloe a full debrief of the arcade night, expecting the usual enthusiastic screaming in caps lock. Instead, there's a long pause, then. Chloe, Milo, I need you to sit down. Me, I'm literally lying down, what? Chloe, the milk, the mosquito bites that only bite you, the rock, paper, scissors for corner, the guy who kissed you at that party, instead of the guy he's supposedly in love with, the other guy who put your hand on his abs instead of letting you feel his, both of them touching you in a haunted house, both of them fighting over whose lap you sit on. Me, okay when you list it like that. Chloe, Milo, I love you. You are my favorite person on this earth. But I think you have been so busy shipping a couple that doesn't exist, that you missed the actual couple that's forming, and it's you and two hot college juniors. I stare at the ceiling for what feels like several hours. Me, that's insane. That's genuinely insane. They'd have said something. Chloe, would they though, or would they keep quietly feeding you milk and fighting over your lap privileges until you figured it out yourself, because you are, historically, the single most oblivious person I have ever met? I don't respond right away. I lie there running the whole semester back through my head like slow-motion instant replay, the kiss, the abs, the diner booth, the mosquito bites, the schedule, the haunted house, the lap. And for the first time since August, the pieces don't rearrange themselves into someone else's love story. They rearrange themselves into mine. My face goes hot in the dark. From the bunk above me, I hear Dominic shift in his sleep and mumble something that might be my name. From the bunk beside me, I hear Sebastian's breathing go carefully, deliberately even, the way it does when he's pretending to be asleep and isn't. I do not sleep for a long time. The next night, when Sebastian holds out the usual mug of warm milk, I do something I've never done in 3 months of this ritual. I don't take it. Not thirsty, I say, which is a lie so transparent I can hear it fall flat the second it leaves my mouth. Sebastian's hand stills mid-air. Something crosses his face, surprise maybe, or the beginning of worry, before it smooths back into neutral. You feeling all right? Fine, great, never better. I busy myself very intensely with a textbook I am not reading. Across the room, Dominic pauses his video game entirely, which for Dominic is the equivalent of stopping his own heartbeat, and studies me with narrowed eyes. You've been weird all day. I have not. You have. You wouldn't make eye contact with either of us at dinner. I feel my ears go red and duck further behind my textbook, and I catch, just barely, in my peripheral vision, Dominic and Sebastian exchanging a look over my head, a whole silent conversation passing between them that I am, for the first time, actually paying attention to. Later that night, I watch from behind my curtain as Sebastian, thinking I'm asleep, pours the untouched mug of milk straight down the bathroom sink instead of drinking it himself. It was never about height, I think, staring at the ceiling, pulse hammering. It was never about anything except me. I do not sleep again. Then, inconveniently, the semester ends, and I go home to Columbus for 3 weeks, and discover that distance is a remarkably efficient way to make a person stop lying to themselves. Chloe watches me mope around the house for approximately 4 days before staging an intervention over breakfast. You've checked your phone 11 times in the last 10 minutes, she says, not looking up from her cereal. It's been counted. I'm waiting on an email. You are waiting on Dominic Carter to text you back about literally anything, including but not limited to a photo of his dog-shaped waffle. She's not wrong. Dominic has, in fact, texted me a photo of a dog-shaped waffle at 8 in the morning his time, captioned "Thought of you," for reasons neither of us examined too closely, and I have looked at that photo more times than is reasonable for a picture of breakfast food. Sebastian texts less often but more precisely, a photo of Austin under a rare December frost, captioned "Only cold enough for you yet, Ohio," which shouldn't make my chest ache the way it does, and does anyway. On December 23rd, my phone rings at 11 at night, and it's a video call, both of them crammed into frame from what is unmistakably our dorm room, Dominic's face taking up most of the screen because he refuses to understand phone camera angles. "We miss you," he announces without preamble. "It's boring here. Sebastian's been alphabetizing his bookshelf out of, quote, nothing better to do." "It needed doing," Sebastian says, from somewhere off camera, though he leans into frame a second later, closer to Dominic than strictly necessary for the shot, and something about the easy way their shoulders brush makes my throat tight. "How's Ohio?" Sebastian asks. "Cold, quiet. Chloe won't stop interrogating me about you two." "About which parts?" Dominic says, waggling his eyebrows in a way that should not be charming, and is infuriatingly charming anyway. "All parts. She's very thorough." We talk for 2 hours about nothing. Dominic's family's chaotic Christmas Eve tradition of competitive gift wrapping, Sebastian's quiet admission that he's never actually liked being away from campus over break because his own house is too empty and too loud in different rooms at once, a fact he delivers so flatly it takes me a full minute to register how much it costs him to say it out loud. I fall asleep with the call still going, phone propped against my pillow, their voices low and familiar in the dark, and wake up to a black screen and a text from Dominic. "Fell asleep on you. Sue us." Merry almost Christmas, Milo. I lie there in the dark of my childhood bedroom, in the town I grew up in, 400 miles from either of them, and understand clearly, finally, without Chloe having to spell it out a second time, that somewhere over the course of one very chaotic semester, home had quietly relocated itself to a cramped triple dorm room on the 4th floor of Jester Center, and I hadn't even noticed the move. I count down the days until I fly back to Austin like a man counting down to something enormous, because I am, and I finally know it. I need air. I need cold water and cognitive distance and approximately 400 years to process my own life. So on Saturday morning, I walk the 2 miles to Barton Springs Pool alone, hoping the 52-degree spring water will shock some sense into me. It does not. What it does is give Dominic and Sebastian, who have apparently tracked my location like a 2-man search and rescue operation, exactly enough time to find me sitting on the concrete edge with my feet in the icy water, staring at nothing. They sit down on either side of me without asking. Nobody speaks for a full minute, which is a record for this trio. Finally, Dominic breaks first, because Dominic always breaks first. "Okay, we need to talk. Actually talk, not like fight about the thermostat talk." "I know," I say, to the water. "You know," Sebastian's voice, careful. "I know it was never Dominic and you. I know the milk was for me. I know my face burns. The mosquito bites were not mosquitoes. I know about the schedule. I know the party kiss wasn't a panic thing." I finally look up at both of them, at the same expression of terrified hope on 2 very different faces. I've just been the single dumbest person on this campus for 3 straight months. Dominic exhales like he's been holding it since August. "You have literally no idea. Do you know how many times I almost just told you?" And then you'd bring up some ship name for me and Sebastian, and I'd think, okay, cool, guess I'll die of feelings alone forever. "I told him it was easier to let you figure it out," Sebastian says, "than to tell you outright and watch you decide we were a fever dream." "You could have just said something," I say. "Could you have?" Sebastian raises an eyebrow, and it's such a fair point that I have nothing to say back. The wind picks up off the water. Dominic's hand finds mine on the concrete between us, warm and a little unsteady, which is new. Dominic is never unsteady about anything. On my other side, Sebastian's fingers brush my jaw, tilting my face toward him, slow enough this time that I could stop him if I wanted to. I do not want to. So Dominic says, low, rough at the edges, for the record. Not a ship. Never was. There's no ship, Sebastian agrees quietly, thumb tracing my cheekbone. Just us, if you want that. I look between them, golden and warm on one side, sharp and quiet on the other, both of them looking at me like I'm the only answer to a question they've been asking all semester, and something in my chest, some old shipper's instinct that spent 3 months rooting for the wrong story, finally, gently, lets go. I want that, I say. What happens next involves considerably less commentary from me and considerably more of Dominic's laugh against my mouth and Sebastian's hand steady on the back of my neck. And if you want the play-by-play, you can ask Barton Springs, because it witnessed the whole thing and, unlike me, was paying attention from the start. Nobody quite knows how to date 2 people at once when none of you have done this before. So the first official outing happens 3 days later, and it is, predictably, a disaster in the most wonderful way. Dominic insists on planning it, which means we end up at a food truck park off South First with barbecue sliders and a plan so vague it barely qualifies as one. Sebastian, arms crossed, surveys the picnic table like it has personally wronged him. You didn't make a reservation, he says. It's a food truck. There's no reservations. That's the whole point. It's low pressure. You told me to dress nice for low pressure. I wanted you to look good. Is that a crime? For a food truck. They bicker the entire walk to the counter, and I trail behind them, grinning so hard my face hurts. Because somewhere in the last 72 hours the bickering has stopped sounding like tension I need to solve and started sounding, simply, like theirs. A rhythm they've had long before I ever showed up to disrupt it, one I've apparently been folded into rather than standing outside of. We eat at a picnic table under string lights, knees knocking together in the cramped bench space, and when Dominic reaches over to steal a fry off my plate without asking, Sebastian catches his wrist mid-theft with 2 fingers. Ask first, Sebastian says. We've discussed this. When did we discuss this? Just now. Dominic, betrayed, appeals directly to me. Are you going to let him do this? Police my fry consumption on our first date? I think I say very seriously, fighting a smile, that you should ask first. Unbelievable. Both of you ganging up already. I see how this is going to go. But he asks, grumbling, dramatic, delighted, and I hand him a fry myself, and Sebastian's mouth does that small, almost smile thing again, the one I've started keeping a private count of, and under the table, unprompted, 2 different hands find their way to mine at almost the exact same moment, tangling together over my knee like it's the easiest thing in the world. It is, I will think later, an entirely unglamorous first date, plastic picnic tables, a slightly burnt brisket slider, an argument about French fry etiquette, and also, without question, the best one of my entire life, because for the first time all year, I'm not narrating somebody else's love story from the sidelines. I'm sitting right in the middle of my own. I do not, of course, get to keep this development private, because I have a sister with the investigative instincts of a bloodhound and 0 chill. Chloe flies down for a long weekend in late January, ostensibly to see the campus, actually to interrogate my roommates in person. Within 4 minutes of meeting Dominic and Sebastian outside our dorm, she's got her phone out filming, narrating like a nature documentarian. And here we see the elusive double boyfriend species in its natural habitat, she says, as Dominic instinctively steps between her and traffic and Sebastian, silently takes her overnight bag without being asked. Notice the competitive provider behaviors. Chloe, I hiss, mortified, put the phone away. Absolutely not, this is content. She rounds on Dominic, so who confessed first? I did, Dominic says immediately, chest puffing with pride, obviously. He did not, Sebastian says. I told Milo the milk was for him 3 weeks before Carter managed a coherent sentence. You didn't tell him, you made cryptic eye contact and poured milk down a drain. They're off, bickering with the exact same energy they've had since August, except now Dominic's arm is looped loosely around my shoulders while he argues. And Sebastian's hand finds my other one without either of them breaking stride in the fight. Like the arguing and the affection were never actually separate things at all. Like I'd been wrong, all semester, to think the fighting was hiding something. The fighting was the something. It just took 2 boyfriends and 1 baby sister to show me. Chloe lowers her phone, grinning so wide it looks painful. Okay, I take it back. This ship rocks. I'm so glad I get to say I called it. You called nothing, I say. You built an entire prosecution case off my texts. Semantics, she says, and hugs me so hard I nearly fall over, and over her shoulder, I catch Dominic and Sebastian looking at each other with matching, helpless, adoring expressions, the kind neither of them would ever admit to on record. I'd spent an entire semester hunting for that exact look between the two of them. Turns out I just had to look up. A few months later, in May, I'm sitting in the stands at the Frank Irwin Center, watching two men in matching burnt orange gowns cross a stage, and I am, against every instinct I have, absolutely sobbing. Dominic trips slightly going up the stairs and recovers with a grin so wide the whole arena probably sees it. Sebastian, 3 names later, walks with the exact composed precision of a man who has never once tripped in his life and never will, and somehow that's just as funny to me. Afterward, in the chaos of gowns and family photos, and Chloe running around with her phone filming everything for what she insists will be the wedding documentary someday, don't argue with me. Dominic scoops me clean off my feet in a hug that knocks the air out of me, and Sebastian, less dramatically but no less thoroughly, kisses my temple and says, "You survived a full year of us. Congratulations." Barely, I say, laughing into Dominic's shoulder. "You loved every second," Sebastian says, and he's right, damn him, he's completely right. I came to this school as a professional bystander to other people's love stories. I'm leaving this particular chapter as the actual point of one. Worst ship hunting instincts of my life, best possible outcome anyway. People ask us, sometimes, how a proposal even works when there are 3 people involved instead of 2, and Dominic and Sebastian have never once given the same answer twice. I asked him first, Dominic says, Barton Springs, got down on one knee in the grass, very smooth, very romantic. You tripped, Sebastian says, into the water, with the ring. I recovered gracefully. You made Milo dive in after a $200 ring while you stood on the bank yelling instructions. Constructive instructions. What actually happened, for the record, is this. It was late April, Barton Springs at sunset, and Dominic did get down on one knee, and he did, in fact, immediately lose his balance on the wet concrete and go stumbling backward into the water with a yelp loud enough to startle a family of ducks. Sebastian, rather than laughing, which is what I fully expected, was already crouched beside me with a second ring box in his jacket pocket, calm as ever, saying, "He's been carrying that thing around for 2 weeks working up the nerve." Mine's dry, at least, and sliding a second ring onto my other hand while Dominic spluttered his way back onto dry land, drenched, mortified, and laughing so hard he could barely get the actual question out. I said yes twice, to 2 different men, in the same 5 minutes, dripping pond water onto my shoes, and it remains, without argument, the single best afternoon of my entire life. Married life, it turns out, mostly consists of arguing about grocery lists. I am telling you, Dominic says, holding up a receipt like it's Exhibit A in a murder trial, we do not need a 4th kind of hot sauce. We need a 4th kind of hot sauce, Sebastian says, without looking up from his laptop, because you used the 3rd kind entirely on nachos you made at 1 in the morning and didn't share. That's a lie fabricated to win an argument. That's a documented fact fabricated by your own behavior. I sit at the kitchen island of our little house off South Lamar, the one we bought last year with a ridiculous amount of help from Sebastian's spreadsheet obsession and Dominic's inability to say no to a fixer-upper with good bones, and watch my 2 idiot husbands bicker over condiments with the exact same energy they had arguing over a dorm room thermostat 5 years ago, except now there are matching gold bands involved and a dog named Waffles asleep between their feet. You're both being ridiculous, I say. He started it, they say, in unison, and then glare at each other for saying the same thing at the same time, which is somehow the most married couple moment either of them has ever produced. For our 1-year wedding anniversary, they take me back to Barton Springs, the actual spot, the actual concrete ledge, though the water still feels exactly as personally offensive and cold as it did the first time. You know, Dominic says, feet in the water, arms slung around my shoulders like it's never once left. Chloe wants us to renew our vows every year just so she has an excuse to fly down and film it. Chloe wants a lot of things, Sebastian says dryly, most of them involving a documentary crew and questionable narration. She's not wrong that this is good content, though, I point out. You would say that. You still have the group chat pinned that's titled Ships That Will Destroy Me, Sebastian says. I've seen your phone. I earned that folder. I lived through it. You caused it, Dominic says, grinning. For like 3 straight months you thought we were dating each other. In my defense, you were extremely convincing enemies. We were extremely convincing husbands in training, Sebastian corrects, and kisses the side of my head with a casualness that still, 3 years later, makes my stomach do something warm and stupid. Dominic, never one to be outdone in matters of affection, pulls me sideways off the ledge entirely and into the water with a whoop loud enough to startle every turtle in a 50-foot radius, and I come up sputtering, laughing, dragging Sebastian in after us out of sheer petty principle. And for a moment, the 3 of us are just splashing around in 52-degree water like a bunch of idiots, exactly the way we did, the year I finally stopped shipping other people and started living my own story. That night, back at the house, Waffles asleep on the couch and takeout containers scattered across the coffee table, Dominic falls asleep first, head heavy on my shoulder, one arm slung possessively across my lap, even unconscious. Sebastian sits on my other side, quietly reading, occasionally reaching over without looking up to lace his fingers through mine. Hey, I say softly so I don't wake Dominic. I used to think the best love stories were the ones you watched from the outside. Safe, no stakes, just good popcorn material. Sebastian glances over, something soft pulling at the corner of his mouth. And now? I look down at Dominic's sleep-heavy weight against me, then over at Sebastian's hand wrapped around mine, at the life we built out of a triple dorm room and a very badly shipped non-existent romance, and I think, honestly, that no story I ever read came close. Now I think the good ones are supposed to have you in them, I say. Sebastian doesn't say anything clever back, for once. He just leans over, careful not to jostle Dominic, and kisses me. Slow, unhurried, entirely certain, the way a man kisses something he already knows he gets to keep. Somewhere in Ohio, my phone buzzes with a text from Chloe that I don't check until morning. Still can't believe I called it before you did. I want that on my wedding toast someday. Love you both, tell Waffles, I said hi. I fall asleep between them, exactly where I've apparently belonged since a hot August afternoon in Jester Center, and for the first time in my entire shipping career, I don't spend it wondering what happens next. I already know. I get to live it. If this story pulled a laugh, or a little ache, out of you, drop a comment and tell us which part hit closest to home. Your comments are what tell us which stories to chase next, so like, subscribe, and stick around for more. Thank you for spending this time with us. We'll see you in the next one.